Good morning and welcome to the New York edition of the SDN Panel. I'd like you to welcome my panelists today. Starting off, Dave Larson, VP and CTO of HP Networking. Kevin Hooper, Senior Vice President and General Manager of NEC Corporation of America. Frank D'Agostino, Senior Director of Marketing and Solutions at NCMA Networks. And Najam Ahmad, Director of Networks for Facebook. Wow. While Rob may have been feeling a little Lady Gaga, I'm feeling a little Britney Spears today. We're here today to talk about the progress we've made in SDN. This is really SDN, what's it good for today? SDN promises a whole range of capabilities that have sparked the imagination of network architects, network operators. But it's been fairly theoretical, a lot of the discussions that we've been having. As you've seen this week, we're starting to get to the point that we're moving beyond the theoretical to now getting to implementations that are actually delivering real value, real production environments, in environments that we can start to see exactly what implementations of SDN can do and the value that they can provide. So let's kick it off with some questions about where we're headed in terms of SDN, and really I'd like to ask each of you, what are either you or your customers doing with SDN, and what's the value you're extracting? And Najam, why don't you start with you? I mean, Facebook has been rolling out capabilities of virtual networking for a bit now, and a little bit beyond the POC phase. Where are you guys today?
We feel SDN's just the way to build networks, and it's about software driven. For us, agility tends to be the most important thing. If you look at the development environment at Facebook, the application and the other parts of the infrastructure stack moves far quicker than networking has ever moved. Just because it's in the traditional way, it's never been software driven. Network engineering essentially has protocols and CLI as their primary tools to make things happen. So if the protocol doesn't do it or the CLI doesn't expose it, we can't really do much.
There was a CEO a year ago who made the comment that real men build networks with CLI.
CLI is dead. It's over. The game.
We can only hope.
So
I should retire my putty client now, right?
Well, I still use mud at times. So the clients are good, but from a perspective of adding functionality, changing things we do, building monitoring capabilities, reacting to failures, things of that nature, we want to be able to do that in code and do it really, really quickly, like overnight. So we've had instances where we found something in the network. That evening, we wrote some tool to go scan the whole network, figure out what's happening, and then write remediations. And the next morning, it was software that was remediating the network, not people. So essentially what we want is we want the robots running the network, but the people building the robots. And the traditional way of building networks with protocols and CLI just doesn't allow for that to happen. So that's like one use case for us. The other use case is about managing our traffic and managing how the data flows from the end user, who could be anywhere in the world. Or if you look at Facebook's user base, 82% of the users are outside the US. That's a fairly staggering number. So we have pretty much any country in the world we have users. And how do you control the traffic or manage the traffic efficiently to provide the best user experience at the lowest cost possible? The current protocol sets don't give you the knobs or the ability to do that. And the ability to add new knobs is fairly cumbersome. You either have to go to standards body to get new knobs placed in, or you talk to your vendor, go through a product cycle, all of those type of things to get a feature. So what we end up doing is building stuff that we can do it in software and try things overnight.
And being able to tackle what have been some thorny traffic engineering problems traditionally.
Traditionally.
So actually, I want to open it up to Frank
Sure.
and Kevin. Guys, so for you guys, what's in terms of practical capabilities, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so what customers are talking to us about really is sort of what's the practicality? How do you operationalize this technology? And also on top of that, how is the technology monetized? Because we're all vendors, right? So they want to know that. And I think the industry's kind of stuck in that position at this point. So they're trying to monetize the method of SDN, and there are multiple methods of SDN, which customers are trying to sort out. So, you can go down the O&F path, you got overlays, you've got, MPLS mechanisms with BGP, you've got all of these things. And then on top of that, you've got issues like, to take an example of a popular implementation at this point, VMware NSX is extending the per VM price tax they do on compute virtualization into networking, and they're going to make it more expensive and less scalable than it's ever been. So how do you operationalize any one of those technologies? So customers want any workload anywhere. They want to be able to they want to maximize the utilizations of the assets that they have in place. They want to automate it to support what Najam is saying. VLAN plumbing is dead. It's over. That's no longer a career anymore.
Hit those scale limits a long time ago.
And the issue, well, and there's scale issues, but there's really the practicality of not only that, once you've defined a service logically and you can put it anywhere at the edge, then when you move it into an environment where you can automatically instantiate it, you can't do that without performance and visibility. And this is really the key thing. How do I have an application spread anywhere, but I can't see the application or see its performance and visibility in real time?
Yeah, and Kevin and Dave, you guys have both been on the equipment side and really working with this for a considerable period of time now. Where do you see practical aspects of what customers are doing?
So for us, and NEC's had a long history in this, and it was very early to the game. So we've had a lot of experience in what are the real business drivers that help you get over that inhibition to take the leap into SDN. But it really comes down to the basics, IP address proliferation, time to deployment, provisioning, and then one that is very interesting because we have a real situation where this was the motivating driver for deploying it, is just getting the server and the storage guys to talk to the network guys and to collaborate.
That's a big enough challenge into and of itself.
Absolutely, and when it comes down to the way you implement SDN, there's absolutely no choice. So it forced that collaboration to occur, and then that drives real business value.
Dave, are you seeing those kind of collaboration concerns, or is that something that's bringing together these teams? I mean, that's been a big challenge historically.
The customer environment is giving us the same information as well, but we are seeing it more in terms of a question that says, how do I extract business value from this investment? Not how do I automate, how do I do a specific portion of or implementation of policy around QoS. For instance, HBO came to us a while back and they said, look, we're having a real problem with security at the edge of our network. The Ethernet access layer is a propagation for botnet activity. Can you please help us? And we said, yes, we can, and we can do that with SDN and with OpenFlow.
So these are not scale issues. These are functionality issues. These are things you just
exactly
can't do easily otherwise.
Yeah, so we did something that simply could not be done in an economic model. If you look at the Ethernet access layer and you look at the bandwidth aggregation at that point, and then you try to look at the economy of applying deep packet inspection in the form of an IPS to that environment, it quickly scales beyond the economy that you've budgeted for that environment. So we can infuse that capability directly to the port by introducing a controller and utilizing an open protocol like OpenFlow.
And when you talk about raising a lot of that visibility and bringing control, it starts to open up the question of how do we integrate, and what's the degree to which we have to integrate application visibility in this? I mean, from the Facebook side, you guys have got the ability to control that entire stack. You've got application awareness that really, you've got some flexibility in how you drive that down. But that's driving a lot of what you're doing in terms of network control, yes?
Yeah, essentially what you end up doing is doing detection and correlation at multiple spots in the stack, everything from application to the network or even down to the data center. Because a lot of times those incidents are related, and be able to detect where a specific problem's happening or about to happen is really important. So if your network is seeing a trend, how can you relate that to what the application might be seeing? Traditionally, these two parts of the stack have been really, really separated. It's been a pretty hard line
been no
between the
real
application. Yeah. And so what we've built is systems that actually all the alerts go into the same system, and you're able to do a lot more correlation and things of that nature to detect things faster across the stack.
Yeah, we've made attempts to do that. Any RSVP veterans out there? Yeah, we've made attempts to do things like this, but it's been a tough thing to be able to integrate.
The application side is really the critical aspect because, again, how do you spread an application anywhere within a pod, between pods, between data centers, or into the cloud if you don't have visibility? And you need to have that performance and visibility in real time. And this is where SDN needs to expand beyond its current definition, because all of the endpoints of the application stack are not necessarily part of the current SDN model, and that's why you need to really look at it more holistically of the logical pipeline of the entire service, including load balancing, including security, including placement and visibility.
Yeah, but that integration is not simple. And Dave, we've been talking about some of the things you guys are doing. The HBO example you were citing. I mean, that's looking at security functionality pieces. I guess, where do you see that application integration happening?
Well, in the Facebook example, and you can look at Google, a lot of this emerged initially as a network virtualization at scale proposition. The reality is the tool can be used far more widely than that. So we're building network virtualization at cloud scale with HP Cloud, but we are also recognizing that there's a real opportunity to change the status quo of how the network is looked at as a blocking element to getting things done in service deployment, and changing it and allowing it to be a business enabler. Whether it's the enterprise, the branch, the WAN, the data center, it doesn't matter. Your first question is a good one. What are people doing with SDN? Well, the reality is they're not doing a lot yet, but there is a lot that they want to do. And the thing that's missing, Frank's right, it's about applications. But we need to create and foster the acceleration of application development, because there's a dearth of actual applications that can run on this infrastructure at the moment. And that's why this week we announced our application store and our software development kit environment.
So
I do want to sort of add the other element to this is where I don't think we want to teach the network all about the applications or have the applications know all about the network. It's finding the right abstraction that actually works, and there's some level of communication between the application and the network. I think it'll be a mistake if we start going down the path of trying to teach the network all about every app. That's a losing proposition going down that path.
For the abstractions, I mean, it's an area where we really haven't dabbled in. I mean, we've got even integrations around either existing platforms like the VMware environment, OpenStack. Those are areas in which you present some network abstractions, but the network still doesn't know a lot about what's happening from the application. Application needs some requirements. I guess it seems like we need to be able to have abstractions that are visible from the network side.
Right. So, for example, I'll give you an example of a system we're building. It's a fairly simple system called Bulk Traffic Manager. One of the problems we have is we have gobs and gobs of data everywhere, and a lot of data gets copied around across the network. And when data needs to be copied, it gets copied to a different spot, and petabytes of data moving. So what it ends up doing is causes flash floods in a lot of places. So we build a fairly simple system that an application can actually request, I want to copy 4 petabytes of data from this point to this point, and I need to get done by this time. Then that system can actually shape, limit, and copy that amount of data to the other side without actually hurting the network in any way. So that's a very simple mechanism to control the large copies, batch copies, and things of that nature.
Now, in enterprise networks, that's going to require some management integration to be able to get that all done. Where do you guys see that fitting? Is that a...
So without any kind of validation about what's going on in the infrastructure, nobody automates. And this is really about automation. You have to be able to provide visibility to do the automation, and you want to manage it, so you can see the entities that you're managing. And you can't do that in an abstracted overlay that does not creates a sort of a visibility barrier between the application itself and the physical.
Yeah, I agree with that last statement. I mean, this is not simply about overlays. This is about being able to provide open protocols, standards-based interfaces to be able to make changes in the network in an automated way from a policy and a forwarding behavior perspective. But that does not remove the need for traditional element management and full diagnostic capability across a fabric.
Exactly.
Very few fabrics are actually static.
Yeah.
Many of them need to change capacity, need to change interfaces. They have failures, and they need things to be swapped out. If you cannot marry the two of those together in a meaningful way, you're going to have a very difficult time arriving at a management construct that can actually serve your needs.
I completely agree with everything that's been said. I think this comes down to it's an architectural philosophy. It's not a set of products. Yeah. The products are going to change over time. The only thing we know about our IT industry is in the early stages, because product is the only way to really demonstrate the capabilities of a particular architectural philosophy, we align ourselves with a particular product set. The reality is this is a game changer that's going to change the way we architect, to change the way the nomenclature and the language we use to talk about networks, and it's going to change the sets of problems that we can really solve going forward.
So how do we get to this world? We talked about transitions, and both of you had mentioned overlay networks, and I think we've sort of seen a shift from what was an initial focus on, OpenFlow is really the path to get that installed, to now a realization that overlays, whatever their problems may be, are certainly easy to transition. What are ways that enterprises can make these shifts? At Facebook, you had the ability to sort of build and integrate systems yourselves. Are there lessons that you've learned in terms of how you built that and how you shifted from your existing environments?
For us, the environment tends to be very different than a regular traditional enterprise. For example, we don't do much of virtualization at all. It's all bare metal. So our problem set is slightly different than what a traditional enterprise would see. What we like is the ability to actually iterate over solutions. So we will go deploy something and then learn from it and then iterate over it over again, which is a slightly different model than coming up with a solution, making sure it works, and then putting it out as a product. So for us, what we like is more of a development environment that allows us to iterate. And that's a very different approach than traditional buying a product that's fully baked, fully integrated.
It's an expectation that you really want to be able to go rev whatever that capability is.
Correct.
In terms of transitions for enterprises that can't be hyperscale, where do you all see that heading?
There's no such thing as a green field out there. They're all brown.
That's right.
And for us, what we found is you've got to understand what's the primary business motivator for doing this, because it will help you overcome some of the challenges, help you overcome some of the hurdles, but then you have to have a stepwise plan that's very well laid out, and you have expectations, and you understand how you're going to transition this. We did this with a large research hospital that transitioned their network on 7 different floors, primarily because they were having trouble moving pieces of equipment from one floor to another. The business motivation was huge. They could absorb the pain associated with doing this. But having a well-developed plan, having an understanding of how this is done in the past really helps.
Yeah, to me, this is going to emerge in a meaningful way only if we establish an ecosystem of multiple vendors with varied interests and varied expertise that they can bring to bear to solve real problems that maybe many of our enterprise customers haven't even realized that they have. They solve them brute force with human middleware. They are out there plumbing the network, managing it with scripts, working on the CLI. The reality of it is, if we foster an ecosystem that allows many different entities to benefit, then we will create momentum in the marketplace. It will drive real value, and it will change the way we view the network.
So I think customers have to visualize the fact that the services that they're running today that might be tightly coupled to a physical infrastructure really ends up being a logical definition of a service moving forward that's completely decoupled from the environment, so it can be placed anywhere. Once you sort of conceptualize that model and think about the policies and all the things that you do individually, to the point that was brought up earlier, which is all the interfaces, both northbound and southbound, and extensions to the open communities have to be there to be able to make that migration. But once customers can just move that physical service into a logical service, then you can mirror between the two domains, and you've got to leverage the existing investments so your customers have investment protection, but then you've got to move that to a new model. And the new model that I see, and I think customers are reflecting to me that what they want is they want the entire edge of the data center to be automated and to be visible, and that and wherever the edge of the data center is to them, that could be inside a domain, it could be outside. The entire environment is fully automated, fully visible, with performance visible in real time. And then once that's all done, what do? You focus on the application. And that's kind of where we're taking it.
Runs that back to the application side. Now, we've got mic runners out here. I want to take questions from the audience. We have our esteemed panelists here. Do we have any questions that will come in from, if you've got a question, raise your hand. We've got folks with mics that will find you wherever you are. Any questions out there? Well, while you are thinking, I'll kick it back to the panel. When does this transition start to take the next steps? We've got implementation points today. We've got equipment that's got capabilities in a number of different levels. As we start moving forward, what are these next steps looking like, and what are the points at which we can count on?
It's starting right now. From our perspective, we will have a GA controller before the end of the year, and we'll have a variety of applications that will deliver before the end of first half of next year. In fact, many of our customers where we've been developing lighthouse environments so that we can test and prove the concept on all of these applications are running in production because the value is there. So there's no going back. If you look back, 1993-ish timeframe, everything was running on a shared Ethernet hub, and we moved to switch Ethernet. Let me tell you, the people who looked at switch Ethernet ports in 1993 and they said, oh, you know, we're selling a few 100,000, I don't know if this is a real business model. Guess what? 3 years later, it was 1 million ports shipped. It was an entirely different business model, and the folks that were focused on solving problems in shared domain, collision domain Ethernet were out of jobs. This whole environment is going to change. Software-defined networking is real. In reality, the acronym is not going to mean much to any of you, I think, 3 years from now. It's going to be about the applications that you can couple to your network to derive real value out of your investment.
And actually, I want to hold just to make sure questions. We've got a question back here.
Yes. How are you addressing security in this model where you have a controller, a centralized controller, and you're talking about automation? If that were to be compromised, and I could do damage in a previous setting to just 1 or 2 units in the whole landscape, now through a centralized controller, I could probably do larger amount of damage. How is that being addressed? Or
Well, I'll start with that just to begin with. Centralized control, or at least integrated managed control, gives you the ability to have visibility into what those configurations look like in ways that are much harder to do. But I'll throw it out to you guys. What's
The audit capability you get out of a centralized model is a lot more powerful than having individual elements and being able to go audit
pieces
all of them.
scattered around your network that who knows who has access to, and where configuration management is much tougher.
Security is critical. Nobody's going to move to a shared service environment or extend any of these workloads unless it's secure. You have to be able to audit the environment, both physical and virtual, from day one. You've got to be able to protect the controller, and every vendor is going to have a different version of a controller. They're all going to tell you the controller's out of the data path. You need to ask them questions about what happens when a vMotion, what happens when a new VM comes on board, what happens when a new physical. You need to look at how you protect the controller asset itself, how you do audit and logging on the controller infrastructure, and it's all going to vary based on the vendor selling you a controller.
I think Frank and Dave both used some terms that were really important that's going to play into the security realm, which is one, an ecosystem of vendors that are all focused on deploying this in open standards so that we can solve these kinds of problems. And then lastly, it's about investment protection. You know, the days of rip and replace are just gone. Exactly. And we absolutely have to work together as a community.
My response would be that don't view SDN as necessarily requiring a centralized controller. That is one model. There will be distributed control points. In fact, our Sentinel security application is designed to live in the Ethernet access layer exclusively and to provide security to a portion of the network that has never had it. In a BYOD world, if you think you can allow your Ethernet access layer to be open, I would say you should probably consider otherwise.
That's exactly right.
Well, and that's all the time we've got this morning. I want to thank the panelists very much. Thank you for your questions. We'll see you out on the show floor. Thanks very much.
Let them come out.